Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and not as always, I'm not going to go into the definitions of Namaste and in la catch. I'm going to refer you back to previous episodes for you to pick that up. I would encourage you to put that in your noggin as a new mind flow and allow yourself to experience that with others and notice the difference it will make in your life. Don't believe me? Test it. You'll find out for yourself. All right, great. So this week's guest is Claudia Noriega Bernstein, and she's originally from Peru, which you will notice the language, although she's now living in Las Vegas. She's an abundance coach. She's a published author, a creative and art director. She's got a couple of books as well as articles, and the books are I Don't Shrink to Fit. Wonderful title. You'll see that in the background on her shelf. And an I Am journal, which allows you the opportunity to journal your thoughts. I would encourage that for anyone. Excellent process. Very self-revealing. And another book called Brighter Day. Now she says, giving back, paying forward, gratitude, and kindness are my pillars for a better world, and I credit them to inspiring my belief system and transforming my life. Claudia, glad to have you here. This is going to be a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here. And that was a great introduction. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome, and you're worth it. So in speaking of worth, all right, and we were talking prior to just coming on air about the situations that we go through and how we learn how to love and ourselves. Early on, I love to kind of peer into the depths and the history and step into the Wayback Machine with my guests and see how they first got in touch with that inner awareness that they have and have manifested now today in very practical and pragmatic ways. But in the very first, inklings and experiences that you had of this inner awareness, and coming from South America, you guys, I know, are much more heart-centered than we are in North America. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you, and what did you notice, and how did you explore it?
Since I was a kid, I always felt I was different. And I didn't want to be different for some reason. When you're a kid, you want to fit in. Mm-hmm. And we have this misunderstanding between fitting in and belonging. So when we are kids, we want to fit in. We want to be like everybody else. So when you are aware that there is something different about yourself, you want to hide it. You don't want anybody to notice. You don't want to be the different kid. You want to be like everybody else. And little by little, I started realizing that I needed to accept myself for who I was with those differences, that I didn't need to fit in anywhere, that the feeling of belonging is what I was looking for, because when you feel you belong, you feel the love, you feel the like a hug from everybody else. Mm-hmm. It's a different feeling that when you try to fit in, and that was probably the main reason why I named one of my journals I don't shrink to fit, because sometimes and oftentimes, as you probably know too very well, we shrink to fit in that category that this world that we share has created for us. And why we do that, so by exploring myself and my brain and my heart and align my thoughts with my feelings, I start discovering it's okay to be different. I have a gift, and whatever that gift it is present right now, because I'm sure I have more gifts to discover, I want to share it. And I want to put a spotlight on that gift so I can give it to others, and I can pay forward, and I can share that gift and empower everybody else around me.
Oh, absolutely. It's exciting and exhilarating to be able to do that, especially when you feel it within. All you want to do is share it, because that's how it's meant to be.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something that's very telling for a lot of folks, and or maybe everyone. That's maybe taking a little too far. That feeling of constriction that we have in being able to step out, and one of the things that directly relates to that, and I'm sure you're familiar with the term aura and thing, and maybe and I'm sure our audience is as well. And it may seem like pseudoscience, and yet there's an electromagnetic field that we project that can be measured.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting, there was another really wise woman that I met years ago in my early 30s who was trained in the Huna way, which is the Hawaiian shamanism.
Mhm.
And she came to Prescott, Arizona, and was giving a workshop. And I went there, got there early so that I could have the pre-time to actually get to know her and talk to her and ask questions that I had, and not impose on the actual workshop. And in talking with me, she says that, well, here, just let me show you. And so she had a pair of dowsing rods, and she said, here's how it works. I'm going to measure your energy in the past, in the future, and then in the present. And we were in a 40-foot square room.
Wow.
So she says, what I want you to do is close your eyes and go to a past event and really go there. And I'm going to go to the other side of the room. I was in one corner. She goes, I'm going to go in the other corner opposite you. And I'm going to walk, I'm going to clear the rods, walk towards you, and I'm going to stop where they open. And I'm going to have you open your eyes. I'm going to mark the spot. And then we're going to do it in the future. And then we're going to do it in the present. I'm like, okay, cool. Sounds like fun, right?
No.
And so we do the past and future.
Mhm.
And it's amazing that almost opened in the same place within inches.
Wow.
Then she picks up a rock from the windowsill, puts it in my hand, and says, here, focus on that. And she starts from the other side of the room, and she gets about 2 steps in before the rods open. So this is a 45-foot compared to 6 feet with the past and the future.
Wow.
Okay, so just that evidence alone ought to allow our viewers to, and maybe even you, to think a little bit more about what being in the present moment actually does.
Exactly.
Expand your own energy, and if that's
your vibrations, in
yeah,
your vibration, where you are in that moment, it's so important to be present. Oh my gosh, we waste so much time, and I talk about this with my clients. We waste so much time talking about the past, and we waste so much time trying to figure out the future. Why don't you just stay in the present? See what you have right now.
and that doesn't mean
Moment.
you can't strategize or plan.
Hey, you
It's
can
the
have,
opposite.
yeah, and trust the process and keep on going, but don't miss out of this moment, because that's really all we have.
That's what you've prepared to do, right?
Yeah.
To experience the moment and be fully present and active and attentive to it. Now, you talk about going back in the past. Let's go there for just a moment with with a little different flavor. So in that process of being aware that you were different and moving from the place of feeling like you were constricted to that place of feeling maybe a bit more fulfilled, and or with capacity to fulfill others in some way. How did that transition take place? What was that like internally? And how did you notice the reflection in the world around you supporting it?
At the beginning, it wasn't very easy because we all have the fear of being rejected. It's just, I think the flip side of that is we all want to be loved and accepted.
It's 2
So
things in life we want,
that's
ultimately, to love and be loved.
that's it. So when you want to be yourself, you take the risk of being rejected, of not being liked, of not being people not being inclusive with you. And that the process that I had to go through was changing the meaning of fear. So what I did, I like to play with words, and I had a very good friend of mine. I still have. He's a dear friend of me. I call him Aussie for osito, which, or also in Spanish, is a bear, and he's a big guy. So
Oh gosh.
I call him Aussie. And sometimes, he sent me a text and he sent me just letters. so I have to figure out what he's trying to say in those letters. So fear, I changed it, and it was face everything and rise. So
Very good.
every time that word would come to me, I would flip the, face everything and run to face everything and rise.
Oh, yeah. It's so funny. I had a very dear friend. He's on the other side now. His name is Willie Whitefeather. He's mixed blood Cherokee storyteller, and he said to me also in my early 30s, in my first edition of One World, he said, that fear is just false evidence appearing real.
Uh-huh.
What we seek to do is free every anxious reaction.
Oh my goodness, that's great.
And of course, then I popped up with the same as you, or pretty much. It's that only I said, yeah, but most of the time we just want to F everything and run.
Yes, yes.
Right. I love how you switched it though. Face everything and rise. Right, because that's given that gives us the opportunity. That feeling of anxiety in our gut could also be interpreted as anticipation. That's the interesting thing about choice.
Yes.
Right,
And
you can go both directions.
When you're excited, and this is scientifically proven, somebody can be checking your heartbeat, and when you're excited and when you are in fear, your body reacts the same exact way. So
and energetically you clench.
Exactly. So you can be like, oh my God, or you can go, oh my God, your body is going to react the same way. So if you are aware of that, and you can switch, you can shift, from the fear to the excitement, imagine how different your approach would be to things in life.
Well, yeah, you go from oh my God to oh my God.
Exactly. Exactly.
You're
And
welcoming the change,
is.
even though both directions, it's complete unknown. You do not know what's going to happen. You just have this sensation that something's going to.
Yes. And why do you have to think that it's going to be a negative thing? Why not think that it's going to be an amazing thing? But we have that choice. If humans would come to the realization how powerful we are, and how powerful our mind is, and how we can shift situations, conversations, relationships, just by shifting the
Well,
way
that takes self-awareness and self-discipline.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of practice that goes into that. And like your other saying on the shelf, it's okay to make mistakes, right? They aren't mistakes, right? They're just learning processes, and we don't need to see ourselves as actually making mistakes.
Yeah.
We're just in process of evolving, and
Exactly.
you have to go through these things to learn them, because this is what we have to do.
And honestly, I think failure for me is not the negative or the bad, if you want to call, result of something that we wanted to do. I mean, I think we fail when we stop trying, really. So if something doesn't come up or doesn't give us the result that we want, that's not a failure. I've been married 3 times. I don't see my first 2 marriages as failures. I perceive them as lessons. I perceive them as experiences. I perceive them as the process that I need to go through to be where I am right now. And to
a lot of that's just learning how to set your own healthy boundaries.
Well, don't get me about boundaries, because, people don't have, I personally have the experience. I'm not judging anyone, but I have the experience over and over and over again with people that think that boundaries is teaching other people how to behave. And that is not boundaries. I had a conversation with somebody a couple of days ago, and I said to her, she was an old client of mine, and sometimes I go and have coffee with them because that's free therapy. So we went to have coffee, and I said, if you go to a museum and there is a Picasso and there is a red robe in front of the Picasso, it's not because the Picasso is going to jump on you and kill you, it's to protect the Picasso. So they're putting that boundary to protect that piece of art. That's what we have to do with ourselves. The boundaries are for ourselves.
That's a great analogy.
We have to put those, ropes around us and teach people how we want to be treated. It's not the other way around. You don't teach them how they need to behave. You teach them how you are going to accept the way they treat you or not, or what you are willing to compromise or negotiate. Those are the boundaries that you are putting. The rest of the people can behave however they want to. You have zero control over that.
Mm-hmm.
You only can control how you want to feel, how you want to be treated.
So let's talk about that process for you, if you would allow yourself to be so vulnerable as to describe what you go through in doing that internally, first of all, and then the process that you went through to express yourself externally and how it grew from, oh, that didn't work, to, oh, okay, cool, that worked just fine.
At the beginning, the same way as when I realized that I didn't want to fit in and what I was looking for was to belong,
Mm-hmm.
I had to teach people how to treat me, and not everybody welcomed it. And I had to mourn some relationships because I was being somebody that it wasn't me, just because I wanted to be accepted. And it was very painful because I was putting how can I say this?
Your heart and soul into it.
But not only that, the definition of who I was in the hands of somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So, healing is a lot harder than accepting somebody else's opinion of who you are, right? Because if somebody else,
I totally relate.
You're great, you're so smart, you're so strong, you're so beautiful, and I'll go, okay, yeah, I'll take all that, and this
but
is
you don't know what I had to go through inside in order to get there.
Exactly. But in the same token, you sometimes don't even believe that, and you're just accepting the opinion.
You're still in the imposter syndrome.
You're accepting, exactly. And that was very hard for me. As much as I love the compliments, I had to take a step back and say, but is that really true? Do I believe that about myself? And it started with the self-discovering of who I was. And with that, discovering the things that I didn't like that much about myself. Because it wasn't all that pretty. We're not perfect beings. So there were things about myself that I didn't like. Why do we have triggers? We don't have triggers because we're perfect. We have triggers because there are things in us that need to be worked on. Mm-hmm. When and I was talking about her, about this, I said, why is it that we look at a woman and we go, who does she think she is? Why? What is that trigger? What is that saying about you? How that woman is your mirror? This is an amazing opportunity for you to look inside yourself and say, okay, what did I think that? What buttons did she push? And which areas of myself I need to still working on so I don't have that reaction? Because really, she's free to dress however she wants to. She's mm-hmm. free to say whatever she wants to. Why that is affecting me? That should be indifference. My mom always used to say the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And I didn't understand that until I was very old. And yes, love and hate are very powerful feelings, but that doesn't mean they're opposites,
No, they both stem from attachment.
100%.
Or it seems so.
100%.
Now, and that attachment, again, like the word manipulate, right? We automatically go to a negative connotation. Not so, right? Mm-hmm. It has the other side as well. You're constantly manipulating your world around you in order to fit it so that it has a reflection that you desire.
Right.
And that those manipulations aren't destructive or using of others, although we do use each other all the time. We
Right.
just use each other because we're willing to, and we give permission
Right.
to do so because we're in that place of love as opposed to indifference.
Right.
Now, do you, and thank you for that explanation. That was really impactful. Do you also sense, having realized that those triggers that are things inside of us that we don't particularly care for or no need to change because there's a lack of resonance in
Right.
it, is there a core level of resonance that we may all have that has those morals, ethics, and values in them or at our core where we know by sensation what is healthy and what's unhealthy?
I think we discovered that through the process. When we're kids, we adopt whatever our parents tell us. And I think that's where the limited beliefs come to play a huge part in our lives.
Mhm.
We inherit our parents or our caregivers or whoever big person that is taking care of us when we are kids, give us, and we adopt those beliefs and everything that they teach us as truth. And it's not until we start discovering who we are that we have that choice, which is such an important word in my life, that we have a choice to decide if those beliefs are true or not. So even in we talked about this earlier before we started recording, we have to make sure that what we are choosing is what we want, and we have to trust the process that where we want to go, where we're going to end up is where we want to go. And that is not always easy. So when I was a kid, I had a lot of limited beliefs. They were inherited to me. And the moment that I started discovering, and it was like, oh my gosh, it was like a lot of ingredients, I had
Sure.
to discover myself. I have to accept myself. I have to reject what it did was not anymore aligned to what I wanted to be, and in the same process, accepting that everything that happened for me, not to me. Get out from the victim place. I mean, it was so much. My dad used to say to me, life is like making a cake. You have all these ingredients. Would you have a cup of flour by itself? No. Would you have 4 raw eggs by itself? No, I wouldn't. So exactly, you gotta have all these ingredients to be able to have the cake that you want to have. And the only person in control of that should be you. You should be the one choosing if you want to have a red velvet, or if you want to have a chocolate, or if you want to have a vanilla. But choose from the ingredients that are available for you so you can have the cake and eat it.
And eat it too. Right. So taking that analogy, and let's look at the current situation or the prior situation that we just came out of, and the constriction from a narrative that was created for that purpose.
Right.
Um, and the difference between playing the victim and not. How did you see that happening for yourself and for others in this process of trying to be forced to be obsessed on self-hygiene and sequestration and live your life in fear?
I think the first thing we all need to do is take responsibility. I mean, what is your responsibility in this situation right now? Yes, it's great. And I am a true believer that to fix a problem, you need to acknowledge there is a problem first. So
Yeah,
yes.
we know that globally now, right?
Right. So now we know there is a problem. We are all aligned. On that, we're all aligned. I don't think there is one human in this world that doesn't feel or think or see that there is a problem. Now, what is your responsibility in this problem? How can you make it better? What is it that you're doing to contribute to the problem or to the solution? And oftentimes it's easier to be in the victim place and feel that all these things are happening to me, and the government is doing this to me, and my school is doing this to me, and my neighbor is doing this to me. What is your responsibility? You know, what got you there? And what are your thoughts about it? And how can you contribute to fix that problem and not be part of the problem?
Now, do you live in the place of, okay, I see this happening. The reality is, I don't see it anywhere close to me. So do I need to live like everybody else, or am I okay with just still being me and living my life normally as if nothing else was happening? Because a lot of cases that was true.
But then again, you live in this world. That's your choice.
Right.
You know, my choice is always to try to better the situation. And I think that oftentimes we forget about the intention of the people. And that is, I don't know, I'm trying to look the right word. I don't want to say that's wrong, because I mean, I don't have the
Well,
authority
it's
to tell
compassionate.
anybody what's right or wrong.
Yeah,
But
it's compassionate to others to acknowledge where they are, not
right,
necessarily where you want them to be, but just
exactly.
to acknowledge where they are, appreciate that, embrace it, and then work from there.
Yes.
Because you cannot project or you know,
You
treat
have
them
to
as
know the difference
victims.
between
Right.
empathy and compassion. You know, if you don't know the difference between empathy and compassion, then you're just going to feel sorry for the other person and you're going to stay in your own world. If you have compassion, then you're not only going to feel sorry for that person, but you're going to want to do something about it.
Yeah, you're
You
gonna
know,
smile to, you know, it's like, I never wore a mask, and I would always smile. I would greet people as though they weren't wearing them. I would treat them just the same regardless. Some it was okay, others had that 6-foot rule, right? And yet every time I did that, I could see the eyes curl up,
isn't
right?
that great when people smile with their eyes?
Yeah, and they have a moment, right? And that's all we can do, is give them a moment,
Right.
because we're not going to be there. We weren't there before. We're not going to be there later. So in that moment, what can you do? You can share, like we were talking about earlier, the two things we want is love, and is to love and be loved.
Right.
That's the direction that we're headed ultimately, regardless of what we're doing. We sometimes confuse it with accomplishments and an acquisition of stuff, that it's going to make us happy. And then we find out, oh, and I'm still, great example. And my wife and I just watched this movie with new movie with Donald Sutherland, one of my favorite actors. And this kind of thing, he even used the single letter text to this young man that would come to read to him. And I won't give away the movie, but one of the things he said in it to him was that his advice was to dispatch your enemies with haste.
Oh,
And not necessarily that folks are enemies, but like you're saying, when you're setting boundaries,
right.
right, those people are going to move away because you've set the boundaries, and so you've dispatched your enemies
With
in haste, right? You don't waste any time in saying, okay, I'm going to let you come in and invade my space, and I'm going to do this willingly because I feel,
because I've been told.
yeah, I feel disempowered, right? And but we don't think those things. It's just a
No.
process of not honoring ourselves to that extent yet.
Right.
And yet when we do, then there's this dispatchment with haste, because we don't tolerate anything that doesn't resonate with us.
And you will be surprised. I had people that after I set my boundaries, which has been a blessing to me, because I have so much less drama in my life. But there have been people that have come back and had apologized for the way they had treated me. And I have apologized for the way I have reacted to the way they have treated me, instead of just being clear with my words and say, it's not that I'm angry at you, is that I am not aligned with your behavior, and I do want you in my life with the condition of you not treating me that way. It's not that, and let me expand a little bit on this. People should love us all. People should not love us with condition. Like, okay, you know what, Zen, I'm gonna love you only if you wear a mask. That should not be a condition to love somebody. You love the person for who they are. But boundaries are different. Boundaries has nothing to do with if I'm gonna love you or not. It's what
That's self-love.
I have with myself.
Yeah.
I love myself unconditionally, and I'm putting these boundaries because I'm protecting myself. It has nothing to do with the love I have for you. And oftentimes people take those boundaries as an attack. You know, she's attacking me. She doesn't like me in her life. She doesn't do what I tell her anymore. She doesn't call me.
Well, and a lot of times it's because they've never been called on the behavior that promotes that.
Exactly.
And you've cared enough about yourself and about them.
And about them. You totally nail it. And about them. Because I am sure that there are other people in your life that you're treating the same way, that and they don't appreciate it.
T. Harv Eckert said a great thing years ago that I took to heart. And it's true. What you do anywhere, you do everywhere. Now, whether you recognize those patterns spilling out,
that's on
you don't know until somebody tells you.
Exactly.
Right? And you have a good friend.
That's an opportunity to look inside yourself. That's what we were talking at the beginning. Every time somebody says something to you, don't take it as offensive criticism. Take it as take it as a file that is filing your rough edges. Okay. When I remember I had some really difficult people in my life that I was like, I mean, why did you send this person to my life? I was just fine without that person in my life, my conversations with the higher power. And then years later, I was like, gee, this person was a file. I learned about myself with this person. I learned about my triggers. I learned about how I am showing up. So instead of being angry at that difficult person in your life, hey, send them a thank you card. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, because the way you behave with me and the way you treated me and the triggers that you show me I have when you are around me had helped me be a better human. And I am more empathetic, and I practice more tolerance, and I am more open because of you. So thank you.
Absolutely. And in those cases, it's the opportunity to grow. It's the opportunity to understand more about yourself, if you're willing. And it also expresses the movement that is natural and intrinsic with friends, and the ability to express truth from both perspectives without fearing rejection, or even at the risk of rejection.
Exactly.
You still have to do it. And as you mentioned, some go away and then they come back and years later, oh, by the way, sorry, you were right. And I've grown from the experience. I've had that too. It's amazing.
It's great.
It's right. And it just, it's tremendously life affirming in that place. And speaking of affirming, I had a dear friend that what you were saying reminded me of. He was written up in Time magazine in the March 71 issue of being a prophet of his own time. He'd introduced the waterbed industry. He went by Valentine Michael Zamora after Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. And he came up with a process he called Giftigias. And it was just amazing. It's kind of like the 1-minute manager on steroids.
Mhm.
And so you put yourself in the middle of your cohorts, friends, lovers, whatever, and you ask them for your worst, your best, and how you can improve in their opinion.
Oh, wow.
And the only thing that you can say to them, because the tendency we have is to be defensive immediately,
Immediately,
right?
justify it.
Right. So the only things that you can respond with are thank you or please tell me more.
Wow. You know, I have one of the things that I do with I am an abundance coach, and you totally nailed it before when you said people surround themselves with things, because that's the idea of abundance. You know, you have a lot of things, you have an abundance, a life of abundance. And I mean, we can talk hours about abundance, but
Oh yeah, and like we said before, dominion doesn't mean dominion, it means stewardship. Dominion doesn't mean acquisition and control,
right.
it means stewardship.
Right. So one of the things that I do with my clients right from the get-go, you know, after I ask them why they do what they do, and we go through a whole process of abundance and what is abundance for you and all that stuff, we um, we go through one exercise, which is ask your loved ones to write letters to you describing how you show up to them. And that is one of the most powerful things to do, because then in the next session, she or he would read the letters for the first time, and they read it out loud. So the family is not here, they just come with their letters, you know.
Mhm.
Mail me a letter, you know, or not an email. It has to be closed, because I want them to see it for the first time when we are in session. And it's so amazing, the perception of ourselves in everybody's head. People, you know, when my kids were little, I have 3 daughters, and one said one time we were talking about, you know, characters in Disneyland and in the how do you call that, in the books, whatever.
Right.
And one of my daughters in the movies, and one of my daughters said to me, "Mom, you are like Mulan because you're strong and you're this and you're that." And then the other one goes, "No, you're like Cinderella because you're always singing and you do this and you do that." And it was so crazy how the other one said, "No, I think you're like a Pocahontas because you like to go barefoot everywhere." You know, so they picked on one thing and aligned me with a character that in that moment in their childhood they love and admire, which I get chills when I think about it, because I think it's so cute. But at the same time, I learned how these 3 humans that I am raising the same are receiving such a different
Right.
gifts from me.
And
And
the loose association that goes along with it,
I
right? I mean,
know.
so do we do this too? You know, for me, I have these lines of songs and little musical clips and sometimes lines of movies and things in different interactions where it just comes up, right? Uncontrollably. Do you have things like that? Oftentimes it's kind of, it elevates the moment too.
Yes, 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 yes. I, you know, one time I went, and this has been my learning journey. I went to an emotional intelligence seminar
Hmm.
here in town in 2008, and this is a long time ago. And I was very righteous. I knew everything.
Hmm.
Okay, all these people are messed up, I don't even know why I'm here, you know. I mean, but whatever, I'm gonna do it because maybe I'll learn something. That was my attitude going there. And through the process, we go through different exercises and different, you know, situations. And at, you know, towards the end, we had to do an exercise, and I had to pick up, you know, 2 words that define me or whatever. I don't exactly remember how the exercise was, but I refused to pick 3 because I only had 2. So my trainer said to me, this is the rule. You have to give me 3. And I said, I don't have 3. I only have 2. I am so and so. I am this and that. Okay. And he said to me, if you are not willing to do the exercise, then you need to leave. And I said, you can't kick me out. I paid for this. Look how I was. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Look how much I have come.
I was going to mention that. So yeah, because
I have to acknowledge.
Yeah.
So he looked at me and he was like, what? You know, like, what kind of an answer is that? And then he changed his body language. We're very good friends now. And actually he wrote a book about abundance. His name is Chris Lee. Amazing guy. If you ever have an opportunity to speak to him, he's amazing. And he looked at me and he said, who took your joy?
Mm.
And I broke down in that moment because he called me on my, you know what? And I was, what? You know, like,
yeah, right.
How can this person who knows me for 2 weekends can see this? And how many more people can see this? You know, I felt naked. And that
extremely vulnerable.
My goodness.
That place.
You know what it was for me? I was a single mom for a long time, and my perception of being strong was not being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't cry in front of my girls. I was always strong. I was always, you know what? And somebody had taken my joy. And not only somebody had taken my joy, but I had allowed somebody to take my joy. And that was what made me angry and sad at the same time.
Would you go so far now as to saying you gave your joy away?
I gave my power away.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
I gave my power away, and that was a pivotal moment for me. I said, no more.
That's a huge power moment for self-reflection, self-acknowledgement, and self-growth.
That was the moment in my life that I said, you know what? Enough. I'm not a victim. I'm a strong person. Yes, I'm Pocahontas, I'm Mulan, and I am Cinderella, all in 3. Mm-hmm. And I am going to show my daughters that at that time they were still little, that being strong doesn't mean that you cannot be vulnerable, that you can cry, and it's okay to cry. And if you need a good cry, hey, by all means, go for it. And if you make a mistake, you acknowledge it, you own it, and you say, you know what, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And if you have to say a mistake, if you have to acknowledge a mistake with your 7-year-old, then you go to your 7-year-old, because you're teaching that 7-year-old that yes, everybody make mistakes, but you know what? There is a learning out of that mistake, and you have to apologize and own it and acknowledge where the break happened. It was such an eye-opening, that moment for me, of the whole thing.
I have to ask.
Emotional intelligence. My biggest learning was those 30 seconds when he stopped and the whole room was quiet. I was the last one doing the exercise. And
of course.
I'm going to tell you this. We had bodies, you know, when you do those emotional exercises, you got to have a body, you know, like a person that is your body. And for some reason, this person was not, he was totally the opposite of me. He was a guy that was very shy. So my nurturing side, my mommy side, was there to protect him, right? Mm-hmm. And he was going to be the last one. So I was helping him because I thought I was strong enough to confront that trainer and tell him I only have 2, I don't need 3, you know, so let me take care of you first, you know. So I help him, empower him. So he went, gave his 3 words, the trainer said, good for you, and I was the last one. So I went very, you know, righteous and said this and that. And he's like, where's the third one? You know, and everybody was so quiet. In those 30 seconds when everybody was so quiet, and he asked me straight in looking at my eyes, who took your joy? Oh my God. So when people now ask me, who are you? And we do the exercise that I am, and I have to complete the sentence, which is very hard because who are, you know, complete. I'm a teacher, I'm a mom, I'm a lawyer. No, that's not what I'm asking you. You know what I'm saying? So when they ask me and we do those exercises, I am a joyful person. I am a joyful person. That's what I want to radiate, joy. I want people to feel my joy, and I will never, ever, ever allow anybody to take my joy away.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I got asked that question. What was it? Jim Tollison's Empire Building Program. It was back in the early 80s. And who are you? Well, the only thing I could come up with was I am, and the rest is up to your perception.
Good for you. I should have said that.
I don't know, you know, when it came out of my mouth, I thought, why the hell did I just say that? And as I mulled it
Put
over,
the ball back in his corner.
well, I put it in my corner too, right? How do I
Yeah.
want to be perceived?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it was early in my first marriage. I had 2 kids at the time. I was just, you know, starting a professional career in the aerospace industry, and still looking at this other side of life and trying to find fulfillment. And that gave me probably a couple of decades of work on myself to really figure out who and what I am and how I want to be perceived, even though I know or knew that and still know, all I want is to love and be loved. Well, there's a lot to me. And as you peel back the layers of the onion, as you found already, there's a lot there, and not everybody can dive to the depths with me. And that's okay. I don't expect that, right? That's just my uniqueness and how I show up. And as you mentioned, I can, you know, I talk to a lot of different people, and I also, and I seem to be able to create this open environment for conversation by acknowledging where they are and who they are.
Right.
And that's part of what gives me the skill in being able to do that, is that exploration in me and the willingness I had to question everything.
And we never stop learning about things outside ourselves, and we never stop learning about ourselves. I discover things about myself. I'm not going to tell you every day because I have a very busy life and I love to be busy. This is not a complaint, but when I have those moments, those aha moments, I discover things about myself, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, this is good. This is good. And then are other moments that I have a moment, I go, I didn't like that version of myself.
Right.
Why did I go back there? I know better, you know, because we do that. And what you said earlier is true. We resist, you know, we're like, we think we have it all figured out, but unfortunately what we resist persists. So, you know, the lessons are going to keep on coming back until we have that aha moment and go, okay, I get it. I either have to shift, I have to learn, I have to grow, or I have to do something to change this narrative so then this situation doesn't happen again, because it happened already many times. Right. And I'm getting the same result.
A lot of folks, do you find that they refer to that side of themselves as the shadow self? What we don't like about ourselves, you know, kind of want to keep in the darkness, and yet the embrace.
You keep it hidden because again, you want to be loved, you know, so you keep it hidden. Yeah.
Well, and as you've said, you know, the fact is that we need to be able to embrace that side of ourselves with the same love and acceptance and honor. Yeah. Because that's who we are. Yeah. And we want to grow. Then we make the choices to grow or to change the next time that situation comes up, how we respond to it. And that's practice. We're not going to be perfect. You know, some things you take decades of practice to actually become proficient at, just like an athlete or, you know, a scholar or anyone
Practice
who,
makes perfect, right? Practice makes perfect. That's how they say.
right.
You keep on practicing until you nail it. Yeah.
And even then, we're usually, as a perfectionist myself, as an athlete, as a drummer, as a scholar, as a writer, as a podcast producer, of all the things that I do,
Hmm.
there are always things that I know I can improve.
Right.
And I look for those things. I don't always do it in the moment. And then you have that, oh gosh, right.
Right.
And yet you move on and you recognize it. Um, and the ability that you have expressed, that you've grown through that emotional intelligence process as
Mhm.
well, because that's far more important than IQ. You can be
Absolutely.
smart and absolutely socially bereft.
Yes. And then also is the AQ, which I learned not long ago, which is your ability to be resilient to different situations. And that was like, as I said, I keep on learning, I never knew about the
So
AQ.
would that be agility quotient?
I
Or
think that's what they stand for, but it's your
okay,
ability to be resilient to different situations. So you learn from that. And that is why for me it's so important, the journaling,
mhm,
because with the journaling you realize that it was a bad moment, or perhaps was a bad day, but it's not really a bad life. You can go back and see all the positives that you have in your life. You can express yourself freely without any judgment, and call yourself
right. It's like having a counselor.
on your, you know what, I don't know
Yeah,
if I
yeah,
can
yeah, yeah,
pass
yeah.
here, right?
Well, now, would you say that the same process in a
Uh-huh.
way happens with counseling, right? Where
Yes.
it doesn't really matter. Questions are absolutely the most imperative aspect of that.
Mhm.
What the counselor says doesn't really mean much. It can. What means most is your response and hearing yourself talk, because then
Right,
you have another sense that's going, hey, wait a minute, I
right.
don't like what I just said, right? Or how that came out, or, ooh, that's the way it is for me. I need to
That's what,
change,
when you
right?
write it, you can go back and read it.
Yeah,
When I did my journal, I Don't Shrink to Fit, I did a little test with my husband. And I have to tell you, he wasn't very happy about writing stuff in a flower thing. I came
sure.
up, I came up with I did a different version for men. So it's very, like dark, and they can have it anywhere.
Yeah, it's a little more
Still have,
stoic, huh?
you still have prompts and stuff like that. And I can see when my husband is not journaling. I can see the difference. I'm like, you haven't been journaling. He goes, how do you know? One time he said to me, did you read my journal? And I said, why would I do that? I mean, I know. I said, I know, because
You're not processing.
when you follow those prompts, and even the affirmations, because I have affirmations, and I think affirmations are so important, because what we feed our brain is so, so, so important. And I can see the difference. I see the way he react to different situation, how he communicates, his level of frustration, because that's what journaling does to you. It's like an outlet without judgment. And I think if people would journal more, they not only would have more appreciation for their life, but they will be less bottled up,
Well, yeah, it gives you the opportunity, because you got at least two voices,
Mm-hmm.
right, inside of you. Usually more. There's a committee that's
A
in
hundred
process,
percent, a
right?
hundred percent.
So
Yeah.
by journaling, you give yourself the opportunity to listen to the committee,
Mm-hmm.
put it down in writing, and then also process what's happening, and choosing maybe a better route to express it, or to deal with it, or some kind of growth happens,
And
even
you
if
have the time.
yeah.
It's not like if you're asking me a question and I have to, think immediately what I'm going to answer you. When you journal, you really can pause and think, what was the best part of my day today? And what did I learn today? You know, I love prompts in journals. I love prompts because it makes me think. You know, I had journals my whole life, and I had journals that were just empty pages. And sometimes I would have to kind of force myself to write something, because I was like, okay, what am I going to write about today? Because I wanted to continue writing, but I didn't have, you know, any idea popping in my head. So the prompts for me are great because it really makes you think, and it gives you the opportunity to stop and really ponder, you know?
Sure. I use a similar technique with my coaching clients. I do a survey before I even talk to them.
Yes.
And I have prompts, journaling prompts in that, so that I can see how they write, how deep they write, the words that they use in their writing, the thought processes that I can see, at least on a cursory level, that they're using, and how willing they are to be vulnerable just in that initial survey, right? Before even talking to me. And then those things that feel like, oh, we can go deeper here, right? Those are what come up in the
red flags.
Well, they're not just no, they're opportunities, right?
True.
Because you can deepen the conversation, allow them to express themselves in a psychologically safe and intellectually humble environment, which you provide as a coach. And it gives them that opportunity to hear themselves process at a little deeper level, and then maybe ask the questions that help them rise above it and take different actions the next time something happens.
Right.
And it's a wonderful experience, and it's just rewarding, right? Because we're able to share that, be present, share, not have our own prescriptive ideas, right? Because everybody's got the answers inside of them. It's just our job to ask the right questions to pull them out.
And everybody wants to say what the other person expects to some extent, which when you journal or when you have a coach, you don't have to, because you're in a safe place to express yourself how you really feel.
Right.
You know, and then bring that practice to the world. But that doesn't happen overnight, because again, we go back to the wanting to be loved, not being rejected, fear of people's opinion. And that's what makes us, you know, shrink.
Now, there's an interesting comment that I saw some years ago, and it allowed me to think about things a little deeper. And what came up for me was that the statement, question, awareness of, we ascend at the speed of surrender.
True, because we're not fighting, we're just surrendering. It's like a balloon.
Well, that's a scary place to be.
Because somebody can pop it.
Right.
And then you fall.
Right. You know, and that ground is like, you know, I learned, we talk about how thoughts create things, right? I was a rock climber for a decade and a half. I'm climbing a rock for the very first time that I chose to lead climb. So I've got the rope with me. I've clipped into the first anchor. It's about 60 feet up. As I'm putting the rope into the clip, I'm thinking, I hope I don't slip on the S in slip. I'm right. My right foot lets go, and I go sliding down the rock face.
Oh, wow.
And it was funny because my rock climbing shoes sounded like a card and a bicycle tire, right?
Oh,
all the way down. And fortunately, nothing happened. However, the reality of how quickly that insecure thoughts manifested. So if that happens that quickly, and that was just a perfect example, I just happened to be aware enough of what I was thinking and how it happened, and I saw it and can report on it as an observer, right? And, you know, I'm thinking, wow, what a schmuck. I knew I had the confidence. I was right there. I was 2 inches away from clipping in.
Wow. But I mean, if we would only be aware how powerful our thoughts are and how in tune we are with the universe, we would be not only cautious about what we say and we declare, but also what we think, what we feed our mind. You know, we create our life. Every positive thought that you can have to empower your day is going to make your day better.
Sure.
The conversations that we have with ourselves, you know, something spill and we said, oh my God, I'm such an idiot, I'm so clumsy. Those are conversations we have with ourselves.
Sure.
And we are listening to ourselves calling those things to ourselves, you know. And if we would only know and realize and accept that all that has an influence in our life, we will be so much cautious about what we think and what we say.
To a point, and then maybe a little more bolder in what we do with it.
Oh, absolutely.
As we learn. Now, do you think that, you know, there's this aspect of linear, non-linear, and non-local when it comes to consciousness, and I'm sure you've done some studies on it. Do you think that we're more linear thinkers with an occasional non-linear moment when we get bumped out of the moment to have a moment of awareness of what's happening in the moment, and then the non-local moment being this opportunity to have an assessment or guidance from that inner place? Because there are different areas and processes and patterns
that we follow because it makes us feel safe.
Right. Now, are those the prescriptive safe patterns, are those linear? Because they certainly seem like they're prescriptives, right? If
right.
This, then that.
Right. It's like a math problem, you know. You expect if 2 + 2 is 4. Therefore, if I do this, this is what's going to happen. And to answer your question, I said I will say yes and no. You know, there are moments that I do feel yes, we are, and there are moments that I'm like, we're all over the place. You know, I mean, it's a day by day. You know, I sometimes don't even want to watch TV. Honestly, because it's like, change the narrative, please.
Right.
Give
we
me
don't
something to think. Don't repeat the same thing that you're repeating because you want me to be aligned with your thoughts, because you're giving me enough evidence that is your evidence for me to think that way.
Yeah.
Give me enough information so I can make a choice.
Yeah, turn the TV off. I haven't watched mainstream media for almost 2 decades by choice. I listen to all the crap. Right?
I mean, I like to know what's going on in the world. I mean, I'm from Peru, so I like to know what's going on.
We get our news sources from lots of different places.
From different places, right. You know, it was funny because yesterday I was talking to somebody and they were talking to me about the last movie for Marilyn Monroe. One of my daughters loved Marilyn Monroe, and they were talking about how this movie is not her and how is the perception of somebody and how they portrayed her so different. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine and I said, but isn't that with everything? Isn't that with everything? You know, is who you listen to what is going to influence how you think. If you only see that perception, that's all you're going to believe. The more books you read and the more information you have, and I feel that the mind and the brain is like a parachute. If you don't open it, it's not going to work. So you need to open it and be willing to receive information from different places, so then you can have your own opinion. You can have your own vision.
Absolutely. There's a great book, you may be familiar with it. It's by Howard Bloom. It's called The Lucifer Principle.
I heard about it. I have not read it.
The basics of it is he does a scientific study of history and how a few people manipulated masses, sometimes entire populations, by telling lies and distributing it through a controlled media stream, whether it be a town crier or the internet, so often that people eventually believed it.
Right. But that's what happened in everything. And that's when it comes what I was saying earlier about the limited beliefs that we have when we're a kid. If you, I mean, if you grow up as a Mormon, I grew up as a Catholic. When in my house, there were certain things that were a fact when they were their opinion, but it was translated to me as a fact. So I grew up thinking that those things were the absolute truth.
Right.
And we're talking about
and don't you dare question authority.
Right. And we're talking about a home. Imagine the world, you know, and that's how you move masses, and that's how you have cults. And the thing that really makes me sad is that humanity has such a need for belonging that they would follow sometimes anything just to be part of, you know, without questioning, without investigating.
Follow the sheep off the cliff.
Without even, you know, trying to see if there is somebody else that might give you a different perspective, you know, because you don't want to abandon, you don't want to betray what you were taught.
Well, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, in the sense that we have within us of what resonates and what doesn't resonate, and the nature of which we're taught that, oh, don't pay attention to those things, just listen to what we tell you. Don't do what we do, do what we tell you. Right? And don't follow what's inside of you, because that's wrong. And yet the person who all of this is based on said exactly the opposite.
Right.
And yet we haven't, you know, even like apocalypse now, the word, you ask 9 out of 10 people on the street, 90 out of 100, maybe even 98, they will
tell you they don't
know. Well, either that, or they'll tell you, oh, that means end of the world.
End of the world, right?
Right. Well, no, that's not what the word means. This is how it's been misconstrued over and over and over again until this is what people believe. The word means unveiling. Right? You're uncovering knowledge.
It's a revelation.
Perfect word. That's why it's John the Revelator, or the revelations of John. That's the apocalypse. Right? He unveiled all this stuff. And we have this opportunity for these things to be unveiled within us when we ask the right questions, because there's infinite intelligence that we have access to. Right. That's the non-local mind, or the mind flow, if you will, that we have access to, and have been traditionally told we're crazy if we try.
Right. Well, those are the beliefs that comes from years and years and years. You know, you do what we tell you, don't question. Right. And I mean, even many years ago, you know, remember what they used to burn books that would open people's eyes. You know, these were bad books for you. You are not to read these books, because what.
Well, they did the same thing with the beginning of the narrative, and the doctors that were stepping up and trying to say, well, wait a minute, this is not our experience. They were all censored, right? It's just different information that was being made available based on their reality and truth, and yet it was being controlled. Right. Back to Howard Bloom's story, right? So those kinds of things, being aware of that, how would you suggest that we, or how did you begin to learn how to see that, question deeper, be a little more effective at it without, like you were saying earlier, causing the perceived conflict with others? Because that's generally how questions are viewed, especially if you haven't thought about the answers of them, right? It feels like, oh my God, you're questioning my beliefs. No, now I have to question my beliefs because of the question you just asked. Right. That's scary for a lot of people, and the first thing they want to do is fight. It's the fight or flight, right?
And oftentimes they fight something that perhaps they don't really believe.
True.
Because they don't, number one, they don't have any evidence, and number two, they don't want to betray their ancestors or their elders.
Well, and they will say that that's faith.
Right.
And faith doesn't mean you can't question it.
Exactly. I agree. And I was having a conversation with my husband. My husband is Jewish, I'm Catholic, and I was having a conversation with him. And I love to have these smart conversations with my husband because, you know, I consider myself a smart person and he's very smart too. So when we talk about things that, you know, deep like that, I learn a lot and he learns a lot, and we're open to learn one from each other.
Sure.
Without emulating, without being convinced, you know. So I am a person of faith. When I don't have any more resources, I leave it up to the higher power, and I ask for a better result, and I pray for a better result. But
and it comes.
And it comes. And my husband you know, Yom Kippur was the fourth, it started the fourth because it starts at the sundown. And he was saying to me, I have this conflict, you know, because I know that there is a higher power, and I know that, you know, we didn't just show up on earth, you know, but I want to know where it comes from. I want to know, you know, and we dig in, you know, and we have these conversations.
That's the Jewish, the Hasidic tradition is to question everything. And that's what the whole, you know, it's about coming together and asking questions and exploring the possibilities.
But I'm the Catholic who asks questions too.
Right.
You know, and I say, but why this? And but why that? I mean, I went to a school with German nuns. So when I mean, my first question that got me in trouble was asking, when we're talking about the Virgin Mary, and I asked the nun that was teaching us religion, and how do you know that he didn't do anything with Joseph? You know, and the woman almost fainted right there in front of me. You know, how dare you ask something like that? But I was a kid and I was curious. You know, they were
as married. You ought to be.
Did they have more kids? I mean, I'm just asking, you know. But when you are in that environment, you're not supposed to ask questions. You're not supposed to even doubt that what they're telling you is what it is, you know. And I always ask questions, and I understand what faith is. But for me, faith wasn't to believe that she really never kissed the guy, you know. I mean, that has nothing to do with my faith, you know. I mean, I had cancer 3 times, and I have faith that I have 3 times cancer for my kids, and God is not going to send cancer to my kids, and that's my belief, and that's it. I'm sticking to it. Okay. Right. You know what I'm saying? But I don't have to accept your belief as a fact. I have the right to ask questions, and that comes for everything: politics, education, medicine. You have to ask questions. You have to have your own beliefs and ask questions and figure it out. Faith is a different thing for me. Faith is when nothing else works, you leave it in the hands of your higher power, and you pray that the best outcome is going to come, you know, to you.
And it does. When you're patient and you don't try to force things. The push and pull in the universe is not up to you. Right?
Exactly. And the timings of God are perfect, or whoever you want to call it, you know. The times are perfect. Things, I believe, happen when they need to happen. You know, you and I needed to meet at some point of our life. If I would have met you before 2008, when I had that emotional intelligence seminar, probably we would not have had the conversations that we had today. Because I wasn't in that place, and maybe you were not in that place. So I think the times are perfect always.
Absolutely.
No coincidences.
Absolutely. And speaking of time, we're running short. I would love to have a moment of salient advice that you could offer to our guests for an everyday experience, or something that they can carry with them put to the test for themselves and learn the effectivity of it. What could you offer for that?
I feel that it's very important for everyone, as we spoke, to journal. I think gratitude is the first thought that should come to your mind every day. You wake up and you're grateful. You're grateful for what is. You're grateful for another day, another opportunity. Practice affirmations. I practice affirmations every day and I carry them with me as a mantra. So when a moment doesn't have the result that I expect or that I want, I remind myself that it's just a bad moment, but it's not a bad day, it's not a bad life. And being true to yourself, I think, is so important. Have conversations with yourself in the mirror. Get to know yourself first. Don't try to be in a relationship with somebody else when you don't know who you are. Know what you have to offer. Be honest with yourself. I think knowing that you are enough, that you are a whole, and that you love yourself, combine it with gratitude, is the recipe to have a good, joyful life. And that's what I try to practice every day.
Awesome. And I asked you for one thing, you gave a litany, and, right, which is wonderful, right? Choices. Again,
go to the buffet. Go to the buffet and pick up whatever works for you. Exactly. It's your life. Claudia, and we're here to be happy.
Absolutely. And Claudia, I really appreciated the conversation today. It was such a joy. You are such a joy. And thank you so much. I know our audience have benefited from it. And I look forward to more.
Yes.
Right? Don't know how it's going to happen. I'm sure it will. Thank you again. I am so grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And namaste and in la catch. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and I will see you next time.